Hello everyone, and welcome to Wisdom and Wealth. I'm excited you're joining us today. On this channel, we explore timeless wisdom for a richer, more fulfilling life, especially designed for those of us navigating life's second act. Today, we're diving into a fascinating question: why you didn't really choose this life, according to Buddhist wisdom. This is a deep exploration of how our minds work, and how habits and patterns shape our reality. It's about understanding why your mind sometimes feels out of control, and what you can do about it. Before we get started, if you find this content valuable, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring these important ideas to more people. We're building a community here, so join us. Many people today have encountered the idea that you chose this life. But what does that truly mean? In the context of Buddhist teachings, this concept isn't about placing blame or responsibility for your suffering in some moralistic or mystical way. It doesn't imply that you consciously made a pre-birth decision to sign up for the exact life you're currently living. Such an idea would still suggest a fixed and permanent you somewhere, and that's simply not in line with the core teachings of Buddhism. From both a Buddhist perspective and a psychological one, the deeper truth reveals that much of your life is shaped by patterns that were formed without your full and conscious awareness. These ingrained patterns arise from the deeper layers of the mind, influencing your thoughts, emotional responses, relationships, and even the opportunities that come your way, often long before you consciously recognize what's happening. Understanding this unseen and often subtle process is the very first step toward achieving real freedom. Have you ever had that feeling, why did I just say that, or why do I always seem to react in this particular way? If so, you are absolutely not alone. Most of us have experienced moments where we surprised ourselves, perhaps repeating old mistakes that we had solemnly promised ourselves we would avoid. This isn't a personal flaw or some inherent failing. It's simply part of the human experience. In the realm of psychology, Carl Jung explored this very concept through his profound idea of the shadow, those parts of our psyche that remain largely unseen and unacknowledged by our conscious minds, yet continue to shape our choices and behaviors from the background, often outside of our immediate awareness. Now, if you're resonating with this so far, remember to hit that like button and subscribe to Wisdom and Wealth for more insights into a richer, more mindful life. Your engagement encourages us to keep creating content that matters. We appreciate you being here. In Buddhist philosophy, this same intricate process is described as the stream of consciousness, also known as siddhasanthati. It's not a permanent, unchanging self that journeys through time, but rather a continuous series of fleeting mental moments. To help visualize this, imagine watching a movie. Each individual frame appears briefly and then disappears, yet when viewed in rapid succession, they create the illusion of a flowing and continuous story. In much the same way, our mental stream moves forward, frame by frame, constantly carrying with it our ingrained tendencies, our deepest fears, and our established habits. But this understanding then leads us to a very profound question: if there's truly no solid and permanent me, then whose habits are these? Who exactly is carrying these tendencies forward through time? Interestingly, the Scottish philosopher David Hume grappled with this very same question centuries ago. He turned his attention inward, meticulously searching for a fixed and enduring self. But all he could find were shifting thoughts, fleeting sensations, and ever-changing perceptions. There was no fixed center, no solid I to be found, just a constant, unbroken flow. And he came to realize what the Buddha had already taught centuries earlier: the very idea of a permanent and unchanging self is something we simply assume, it's not something we can actually find when we look deeply within. So, how exactly do these habits persist and continue? Buddhism offers a beautiful and compelling image to help us understand this concept. Think of a wave traveling across the surface of the vast ocean. The water itself doesn't move very far, it only rises and falls in place. But the shape of the wave, the pattern, can travel great distances across the water. Our mental habits are much like that wave. They move forward through time, passed from one moment to the next, even though there is no solid and enduring person holding them or carrying them along. The pattern continues, not because there is a fixed and permanent self, but because the conditions allow it to. This is how our life is ultimately shaped, not by a single, monumental choice made in the distant past, but by countless tiny moments, flowing together and forming patterns that repeat themselves, often without our conscious awareness. And this repeating pattern is not some kind of predetermined fate, it can be understood. And once it's understood, it can be transformed. Are you finding this perspective shift helpful? Remember to like and subscribe if you are. It helps us reach more people who could benefit from these insights. Let's keep exploring the path to wisdom and wealth together. When people hear the word karma, many immediately think of fate, some kind of cosmic payback system, or some invisible force keeping a moral score. But in Buddhist teaching, karma is not about reward or punishment in the traditional sense. It is simply a natural law, the fundamental law of cause and effect, applied specifically to the realm of the mind. Just as dropping a stone into a still body of water creates ripples that spread outward, every thought and action sets something in motion, triggering a chain of events. And over time, those initial motions gradually become more pronounced, solidifying into recognizable patterns. These patterns, in turn, ultimately shape your life. Imagine your mind as a field of tall grass. Walk the same path across it day after day, and eventually, the grass will wear down, forming a clearly visible trail. Meanwhile, paths that you don't use will become overgrown and disappear from view. This is precisely how habits form in the mind. The more you repeat a particular way of thinking, reacting, or behaving, the easier it becomes to repeat it again in the future. Not because fate demands it, but because your mind, like your body, learns and adapts through consistent repetition. Karma is simply the word Buddhism uses to describe this process of conditioning. It is not a judgment, it's merely a descriptive explanation of how our minds work. The Buddha was very precise about where this process begins. He said, "It is intention, monks, that I call karma." The key word here is satana, intention. Karma doesn't begin when you actually act. It begins with the mental impulse, the underlying push or motivation behind the action. That impulse is the seed that sets the whole process in motion. Two people might do the exact same thing, donate to charity, for example, but one acts out of genuine compassion and a desire to help others, while the other acts primarily out of a desire to be admired or to gain social approval. Though the outward gesture looks identical, the internal quality, the karma, is fundamentally different. And so, over time, the effects will differ too. This concept isn't limited to Buddhism alone. The Greek philosopher Aristotle offered a similar insight. He taught that we become what we consistently practice. We become just by doing just acts, he said. In other words, character isn't a fixed trait you're born with, it's something you sculpt and refine, one decision at a time. Who you are today is not the result of a single choice, but of hundreds of small, repeated actions that have gradually settled into the shape of your personality and your characteristic ways of being in the world. But karma isn't just individual. Your personal stream of choices flows into much larger currents. You are not an isolated event, separate from everything else. You are part of a family, a culture, a world. And the patterns you inherited were shaped by those who came before you, just as your choices will shape what comes after. A child born into a war zone or a broken system isn't suffering because of something they deserve. That child is receiving the impact of collective karma, a web of shared causes created by millions of people, often over generations. Their situation is undeniably real, but it is not a moral verdict or some kind of cosmic judgment. Understanding this helps dissolve both arrogance and guilt. It reminds us that life is not a personal scorecard. It is a living system of cause and effect, in which every intention, however small, leaves a trace. And when we truly see this, karma becomes not a burden, but a doorway. Because if your life is shaped by intention, then in this very moment, you can begin shaping it differently. Now, if you're finding value in understanding these deeper concepts, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the Wisdom and Wealth channel for more insights into building a more meaningful life. Your support helps us share these ideas with a wider audience. At this point, a natural question arises. If habits shape our lives, then why do so many of our habits lead us in the wrong direction? Why do we keep repeating choices that ultimately hurt ourselves and others? The answer lies in a deep misperception at the very core of our experience. In Buddhist teaching, this is called avijja, often translated as ignorance, but it's not about a lack of intelligence or education. It's more like a built-in blind spot. A quiet distortion in the way we perceive reality. And because we see things wrongly, we inevitably act wrongly. Not because we're inherently bad, but because we're fundamentally confused about the nature of reality. This confusion manifests in three major ways. First, we tend to treat things that are constantly changing as if they will last forever. We cling to people, plans, identities, as though they are solid and unshakable. But life is inherently fluid and impermanent. Everything we hold on to eventually shifts, changes, or slips away altogether. And when it does, we experience pain, not because life has somehow betrayed us, but because we fundamentally misunderstood its nature. Second, we often chase happiness in places that simply cannot offer true and lasting fulfillment. We search for satisfaction in external things like success, approval from others, or the accumulation of possessions, things that are inherently fleeting and fluctuate constantly. The more we grasp and cling to these things, the more restless and unfulfilled we become. It's not that joy is impossible, it's that we're looking for it in the wrong direction. And third, perhaps most deeply, we tend to see ourselves and others as separate, fixed entities. We believe in a solid me, who is being wronged by a solid you. This illusion of separation fuels judgment, blame, resentment, and fear. Imagine someone says something unkind. The immediate reaction is, they are a bad person. That's the ingrained habit. But if we pause and look more deeply, we might see something else. This was an expression of their own suffering, their own pain. That one subtle shift, from seeing a person as inherently bad to seeing an action as conditioned by their circumstances, can end a conflict before it even begins. This idea isn't unique to Buddhism. The philosopher Plato described something similar in his allegory of the cave. He imagined people chained in a cave, watching shadows on the wall, believing the shadows to be the whole of reality. They're not foolish or unintelligent, they're simply limited by what they can see. Avijja is like living in that cave, mistaking the flickers on the wall for the entirety of life. And so we return to a question many people silently carry: if I created these patterns, why don't I remember doing it? The answer is simple but difficult to accept, because you weren't fully aware when it happened. The choice wasn't made consciously, with your full attention. It was more like falling asleep at the wheel. Not in a dramatic or reckless way, but in the quiet, subtle way that habits sneak in, over time. You didn't wake up one day and decide to be insecure, angry, avoidant, or fearful. But slowly, across many small moments of unconscious reaction, those tendencies took shape. And now, even if the memory is gone, the consequences remain. The pattern still plays out in your life. But here's the good news: what was built in unconsciousness can be changed in awareness. And every time you see through the illusion, even for a fleeting second, you weaken its grip. That is the beginning of freedom. If you're starting to feel a sense of possibility, remember to like and subscribe to Wisdom and Wealth for more tools and insights to help you on your journey. Your engagement motivates us to continue creating content that empowers you to live a richer, more mindful life. This brings us to a very practical and pressing question. If our minds naturally fall into old patterns shaped by ignorance, are we just trapped in them forever? The Buddha's answer is clear: no, we are not trapped. In fact, liberation is possible precisely because these patterns are not permanent. The teachings of the Buddha are not about believing in something outside yourself. They are about learning to see clearly, to observe how your mind works, and to train it. In this way, Buddhism shares common ground with modern approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy. Both begin with a powerful idea, that your life can change if you change the way you respond to your own thoughts and behaviors. The main tool for this change is mindfulness. But mindfulness here does not mean some mystical or exotic practice. It simply means being aware, to see what your mind is doing, while it is doing it. Most of our suffering comes from reacting without noticing. A thought appears, and we follow it. A feeling arises, and we obey it. But when you train in mindfulness, you start to notice what's happening before the reaction takes over. You begin to interrupt the old momentum. It's in that interruption, that tiny pause, where your freedom lives. Suppose someone says something harsh, and anger immediately flares up. The old pattern would be to lash out in return. But now, with mindfulness, you catch it. You feel the heat in your chest. You notice the clenching in your jaw. You don't act yet. You simply stay with the feeling. In that space, even if it's just one breath long, a new response becomes possible. Maybe you say nothing. Maybe you ask a question instead. Whatever it is, it's no longer automatic. It's intentional. Here's a small but powerful practice. When a strong emotion arises, like irritation, fear, or anxiety, try these 3 steps. First, stop. Even just for a second. Second, breathe. Really feel the breath as it moves in and out. Third, ask yourself, what is this feeling trying to make me do? And do I have to obey it? This is how real transformation begins, not by fighting your emotions, but by learning to sit with them, observe them, and choose your response. You're no longer being swept away. You're beginning to steer the course. This idea is not unique to Buddhism. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." You can't always control what life gives you. Some causes were planted long ago. But you always have the power to choose how you respond right now. That is where your true power lies. And that is where the possibility of freedom begins, not somewhere far away, but in the exact moment you choose to see clearly and respond with awareness. Now that we've explored the power of mindfulness and how it can shift our reactions, remember to like and subscribe to Wisdom and Wealth for more practical tools to cultivate inner peace and wisdom in your daily life. Your support helps us grow and reach more people with these valuable insights. Now that we've seen how the mind operates, how it forms habits, reacts on impulse, and clings to illusions, we can finally return to the big question: did you really choose this life? In one sense, no, you did not sit down before birth and select your family, your body, or your circumstances. These conditions arose out of causes far beyond your conscious reach. According to the Buddha, they are shaped by karma, the accumulated intentions and actions from this life and previous ones. But karma doesn't mean fate. It doesn't mean you're stuck. It simply explains how the past created the conditions you now face. So where is your choice? It's not in a single decision you once made. It's in the many small decisions made over time, decisions so subtle and repeated so often that they began to shape your character, your preferences, your reactions. The life you are living now is the result of these repeated patterns, many of them unconscious. But this is precisely what makes the present moment powerful. It's where you can stop the repetition. Instead of asking, "Why did I choose this life?" it's more accurate to ask, "How am I continuing to choose this life, right now?" Because while the past has momentum, the present has freedom. The Buddha didn't teach us to dig endlessly into the past for answers. He pointed us toward the present moment, the only place where true transformation can happen. You did not choose your starting point. But you are absolutely choosing your direction now. That choice happens every time you meet a moment with awareness rather than habit. Every time you pause instead of react. Every time you respond with clarity instead of fear. This is what it means to become the cause of your own future, rather than just the result of your past. You move from living out patterns to creating new possibilities. When someone asked the Buddha what he had become through his practice, he didn't claim any supernatural title. He simply said, "I am awake." That awakening wasn't a mystical event. It was a clear, direct realization that the mind could be trained, and that awareness was the doorway to real freedom. That same doorway is open to you now. The choice to walk through it isn't about changing your past. It's about seeing clearly what you are doing now, and whether it's leading towards suffering or liberation. This is where your real power lies. Not in controlling the world. Not in rewriting your story. But in the quiet, steady decision to wake up, right here, right now. And as we conclude this enlightening exploration, remember to like and subscribe to Wisdom and Wealth for more profound insights and practical guidance on your journey to a richer, more fulfilling life. Thank you for joining us.